Hi, my name is Lauren and I'm the general manager here at SOI, and today I'm talking with Jessica Wilson, who is one of our providers. She's been a provider for almost 5 years now, and she owns and operates Murrieta Brain Training down in California. Hi Jess, how are ya?
Good. How are you, Lauren?
I'm doing well. Thank you for being here with me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about SOI.
Well, I'm glad. That's what we're here for. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive in. I have a few different questions and topics that I'd like to cover with you. And the first is if you could just share a little bit about how you got started with SOI. What's your story?
Yeah, well, the first time I learned about SOI, went to the national conference that you guys hold in Texas every year, which is located at a private school in town. And it was so exciting to be there and to hear all the stories from the teachers' aides, even parents were there talking about how SOI had impacted either their students' lives or their own child's life. And I think the thing that was the most um, exciting for me was just hearing the trainers from SOI talk, how passionately they believed in what SOI does for kids, how it impacts people's lives, and how they felt about it. Said a lot to me about the kind of program that you guys run. And it inspired me to want to find out more about SOI. And I really had that feeling from the very first minute of being there that this is something that I want to be involved in, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like that type of program where you're like, this is like something I want to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so after leaving that training, I had been contemplating moving into a more private business, maybe tutoring. But once I learned about SOI, I was like, this is what I need to be doing. Like, this is going to be more impactful and more life changing for kids than tutoring could ever be.
Mm-hmm. Because you were an interventions teacher before, correct?
Yeah, so I was working in the public school system as an intervention teacher and previously had been, a elementary school teacher. And the frustrating part in being in that intervention role is that it was designed to help kids who were kind of at risk, right? They weren't completely failing, but the teachers had flagged them as struggling or not quite making it in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw those kids for 30 minutes a day, sometimes only 2 or 3 times a week. And even at that, they're being pulled out of class time just to be with me.
Mm-hmm.
So they're coming to me for help, but they're still missing something in the classroom. And really, what can you do for a child in 30 minutes a day that's really going to impact the educational path they're on, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was getting kids and I didn't know what their true struggle was, like what was really impacting their learning. And I was only specified to work on comprehension. Okay, well,
Okay.
that's just one piece, right? When I started to figure out what SOI could identify in kids, I was like, okay, well, this is amazing because instead of just addressing one thing, I could address what kids really, really need, what they're really struggling with. I could identify and give those answers to the kids because they deserve them.
Yeah.
They know they're struggling, they know they're failing, and they don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw that in SOI, I could give those answers to the kids, give those answers to parents,
Mm-hmm.
because parents hear over and over and over again, your child is not making it, they're struggling, something's wrong, but they never hear why, and they don't really know what to do to remediate that situation. How do they make it better for their kids?
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, being in that role really made me question how we help kids who are at risk. Like, how do
Mm-hmm.
we help them? And so when I learned a little bit more about SOI, I realized this could be that missing link for so many children. And it was for me because I was searching.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was searching for, um, you know, a, a program or something that would provide more for kids that had more meaning. I think everybody gets into teaching because they want to make a difference in a child's life.
Yeah.
And I worked with a lot of kids who were um, in low socioeconomic English
Mm-hmm.
language learners who were struggling every day. And I think for me, learning about SOI meant there was something more that I could give to those kids that I hadn't been able to do just in the classroom setting. Mm-hmm. So that really motivated me to learn more about SOI, read every pamphlet, every brochure, watch every video that you guys had, because I was fascinated by the program. Like, how does it work? How does it help kids? When you hear stories, even if you hear one story from a parent whose life has been changed or their child's life has been changed, then that's enough, right? For you to go, well, maybe that can help the kids that I work with, or maybe it can help my own child,
Well, and that was actually one of the next things that I was going to ask you, because I know in past conversations that we've had, you have talked about how SOI has helped your son so much. Are you comfortable sharing a little bit about his struggles and what's happened with that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that's what makes it really real for me, was knowing that it could help other kids, but it's helped my own as well. When I started learning about SOI, my son was in first grade, and he is extremely intelligent, super bright. His vocabulary has been off the wall since he could first talk. But, in the school setting, he wasn't thriving, right? I could see that he wasn't making the progress that he needed to be. And I was hearing things from his teacher like, he can't read, or his reading's really low, or he's distracted, and I would volunteer and I would look through the window into the classroom and I would watch him and I would see him, zoning out or being in another place, or, looking around the room, not paying attention.
Yeah.
I know this one day that I was volunteering, the teacher did the whole math page up on the board, and then it was time to go to recess, and I went to check in on him, and I saw that he had done the completely other page, the page she wasn't even on.
Oh, no.
And he did it all right.
Oh, that's good.
But he wasn't where she was. I've never been concerned about his intelligence. He's very bright. It's more about his ability to pay attention and be in that learning environment and actually benefit from what was going on in the classroom.
Yeah.
And so, for me, being an educator, right, I was like, okay, well, what's going on with my kid? Does he have ADD? Does he have ADHD? Is he dyslexic? I saw him skipping lines in reading, mixing up the letters in a word, and so I'm thinking all these things, right? Whatever your teacher brain thinks, okay, well, what could this be? What's going on? And, this was right about the time that I was getting into SOI. And so, I started first by giving him the Form L test.
Okay.
And he scored off the charts, right? His scores were great in every single area, except for his auditory memory. And I was like, And I did the thing you're not supposed to do, right? I gave him the first set of numbers to see if he could remember them. And he didn't remember any. And I was like, okay, he probably just didn't understand what I was saying. So I tell him again, I'm going to read you these numbers and I want you to, write them down after I'm done reading them. And so I give them to him a second time. Yeah, no, he still didn't have any. And I was like, oh. Right? That for me, that even just having that one piece of information about my son really changed so many things for us, because instead of being frustrated with him for not following instructions, I had to step back and say, his auditory memory and listening skills are not good. Yeah. He doesn't have that skill set in place. And so for me to be frustrated with him for things that he wasn't hearing, that wasn't fair. And so it changed the way I treated my child, and it also changed the way my husband treated him, right? Because I was like, look, you can't be getting all frustrated with him. He doesn't remember, or he's not sure.
Yeah, he literally can't.
And so that was a big piece. Yeah, he literally can't.
Yeah.
And so, that was a good piece of information to also give to his teachers.
Right.
Because, we knew that. But I think the most impactful piece was when I finally did the IPP assessment with him, the IPP screener, because, he was right at that point where he was about to turn 8, and I was like, okay, it's time. Like we can do this with him now. And that's really where I got the answers to all those things that I had been wondering about, right? The ADD or ADHD, the skipping lines in reading, could it be dyslexia? When we assessed my son, with the IPP, he had terrible balance.
Okay.
He can't stand on one foot. He can't walk the line. He didn't have any of that in place at all. All of his sensory and integration skills were very off, and that explained a lot of other things. We had tried sports. We had tried, a lot of different activities, trying to find something that he would love or that he would feel good doing. And any sport or any activity, he was very hesitant to try to participate in, just really wasn't excited about, like I thought he would.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing was when we looked at his vision. When we started to look at his vision, it wasn't that he needed glasses, right? He didn't, he could see 20/20, everything was great. But when we started to look at how his eyes worked, his eyes did not converge. They veer off to the left when the metal rod's going in. They couldn't track. They couldn't follow in a line, can't move from side to side. And so now I'm like more invested, right? I'm like, okay, well, what does all this mean, when kids lack these vision skills, right? And then you come to find out vision issues that like this afflict many children. Right. It's not just a small number, it's many children and even adults, because it goes unnoticed. And you might see that they skip lines in reading. Oh, yep, that's what my son did. He was reversing letters. He was writing the Y in his name backwards, right? He's in 2nd grade. Why is this still happening? But all of that can be explained by his lack of vision skills. He also would, when he was reading or doing schoolwork, he would lay down on his arm so that he could rely on one eye to be able to see his paper. So for me, I was like, sit up, sit up, sit up. Why are you laying down on the desk? You need to sit up, And so all these behaviors that he had, that I thought meant he wasn't trying hard enough, or he wasn't, focused or putting his energy in. I mean, even so much as he would have a lot of trouble with a lot of members of my family. Because we would be, at family gatherings, and his grandparents would be trying to talk to him. And Ryan's like this, right? He's like, and grandparents, they're like, Ryan, you need to look at me when I'm talking to you. You need to pay attention. And he would go, well, I am. He was, but for him, what I realized, he couldn't hold the stare. He couldn't stay focused on one thing for more than a few seconds at a time. I mean, every single picture of him before SOI is like, and so we're all smiling in our family pictures facing forward, and his eyes are all over the place. He's looking somewhere else, and that explained too, he would have trouble playing soccer.
Sure.
He would think that the ball was going to hit him. We would be watching him from the sideline, and the ball would be 5 feet away from him, like flying by, and he would be doing this, right? Aww. He was terrified that the ball was going to hit him, and the ball was nowhere near him. And we would say, Ryan, why are you so scared? The ball's like really far away from you. And for him, it didn't look that way. And so his whole life was being affected by his visual skills, right? His after school activities, his in school activities, his social interactions with family members. And so for me, that changed our path. I would never have known, even as a teacher, I didn't know to look for these things in my students. This is not something that you're taught about in your, teaching education program, elementary education. You don't hear these conversations to look for, visual perception skills, or if kids' eyes converge, or can they track when they're reading. Yeah, we hear the word dyslexia. Sure. Yes, we hear ADD or ADHD all the time. but we don't hear about that. And when those symptoms are exactly the same or can mirror the symptoms, then it's really kind of scary, you know, how things can get labeled or misconstrued. You know, but since Ryan has done his SOI program, the types of things we experience now, like post-life SOI and IPP training, you know, very, very successful in school, very focused, you know, pre-COVID, his grade teacher told me he's a leader, he's independent, he helps to teach things in the classroom. He's not scared to get up in front of the class and teach to everybody. He volunteers all the time. He, you know, does really good work, and, you know, is getting good grades in every subject. But I think like the most important thing is the impact like on our family and his social life and skills. You know, one of the things I heard from his aunt was, oh my gosh, I noticed such a huge difference in Ryan because he looks at me when he talks to me. And, you know, we think, okay, well, whatever, but that's a huge deal.
It is.
Like, you can't have a job and not look at your boss, and you can't go through life and not be able to make eye contact. And it was physically hard for him before, you know, and now he is able to do those things. Balance and coordination. He has those skills now. Oh my gosh, we took him and signed him up for tennis after taking years off sports and kind of giving up. And he's out there hitting the ball, making connections. It's so funny. I'll have to move off camera really quick.
Okay, no worries.
He went to a tennis camp this summer. A tennis camp this summer, and we're in a different state, and he didn't know any of the kids or the instructors. And it was his last day the other day, and he was picked for his group to be the camp champ. He has never gotten an award in sports ever, right?
Gosh.
He was like, me and my husband were like, what? You know, because normally he's the kid who's like doing his own thing, not paying attention. We were like, Ryan, and, you know, and so that was a huge deal for him. He was so excited. He was like, well, you know, and even almost selling himself short a little. He's like, well, you know, they pick a boy and a girl. There wasn't as many boys as there was girls. I was like, dude, it's still a big deal. You know, you need to be so proud of yourself. And, you know, the other day we were at a place where they were doing archery, and he picked up the bow and arrow. These are things you need vision skills for. And he was able to do it. Second try, he got a bullseye.
Wow.
This is stuff he would have never been able to do. Yeah, like never been able to do.
Yeah.
You know, his vision skills were just not there. So yeah, it changed his educational life, but it also changed, you know, his social, emotional, after school activity life too. So yeah, I think that just that alone for me, I know, his award.
It makes me happy. Like you know, you and I have talked more about him other times, and you know, I didn't know about that, and that's awesome. That's huge for him. And tell him that we're all proud, because it's a big deal.
Yes, I will.
It's a big deal. So
he was like, "Don't you want my award in the background?" And I was like, "You know, maybe I do want your award because."
Yeah. Did he knew you were going to be talking about him today? Did you tell him you were going to be sharing a little bit?
No,
he just wanted it?
No, I didn't. He just thought maybe like in the background it would look pretty.
He's not wrong. It's a very nice award.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Good for Ryan. Thank you for sharing all about that. It's one of my favorite stories, honestly. But and he's just one example. I mean, you know, he's your child, but obviously in your learning center, you work with a lot of kids, younger kids typically. What are some of the most common learning struggles that you see with them? Or maybe a better way to put it, or maybe it's two questions, is why do parents reach out to you in the first place?
Yeah, I think typically we get the parents who have been hearing that same story from teacher year after year. You know, your child is struggling, they're not making the progress they should be. You know, they're just kind of not not making it. And what happens is we typically get kids around 5th grade, and parents have been hearing the same stories since kindergarten, right? And the school hasn't identified them as needing special services or anything like that. They just tell them they're on the edge. And then, about 5th grade, parents are getting worried.
Sure.
6th grade is a big transition. Middle school is a big changing year for them. And so they're coming because they're like, why is my kid not thriving? And I hear so many times from parents, I know my child is really smart, right? Was the same thing I said about Ryan. I know my child's really smart. Why can't they make it in the classroom? We also get a lot of parents who have been told by their teachers that their child may have ADHD or ADD. So a lot of it's like just classroom behavior type of things. And so they're looking for an answer because they're not going to find it. There's no simple solution when it comes to, even with ADD or ADHD, right? They say, well, go to your doctor. But really, that's a rating scale. And if you look at what you're rating your children for, it could be vision skills. It could be sensory integration. It could be, that they're just struggling to learn in the classroom. And so their behavior is mirroring their frustration, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be any of those things. So that's typically why we get parents walking in the door. They think they need a tutor. And that's one of the things I have to really kind of shift their thinking or change their mindset, because they don't really need a tutor. They need an answer. They need to understand why their child is demonstrating these certain behaviors or why they're not thriving in the classroom. And that's what's so amazing about the SOI assessment, the cognitive ability assessment, is because it's going to provide those answers for parents. They're going to be able to, know why their child is not learning how to read, or know why their child is not doing well with comprehension, or why those math skills are lacking. I always tell parents that to think of that assessment as a way to find out the root cause of any learning struggle, and then also to be able to identify those strengths. It's so great to be able to tell a parent who has been hearing bad news about their kids for years that, hey, look at all this wonderful, strong, gifted abilities. I can't tell you how many times we get kids who are extremely, extremely gifted in like 80% of their abilities, and then to only have 20% low, but those are the ones that they really need for school. So it's impacting them significantly. And I tell parents to think about those cognitive abilities as the prerequisite skills that kids need to be successful in school. If you don't have those abilities in place, then you're not going to be a successful learner. Because sometimes it's hard for parents to understand, well, what are we getting at here when we do this test? Because it's not multiplication or straight addition and subtraction. We're not doing a lot of reading comprehension questions. They want to know how it relates to the learning. And I think that's the thing, is that they need to understand, well, this is what you need to be able to do good in school. And so I really have to kind of tell parents, like, at the end of the day, you want a long-term solution where tutoring is just going to provide you with a short-term solution. You can tutor your way through, fractions or, double-digit multiplication, and that might help a child in the short term, but it's not going to have the long-term impact like SOI is. When parents are coming in and their kids have been doing this when they should be doing that. I don't know if you've ever heard of the achievement gap. Most of the times kids who are on that lower level when they should be like this, and that's the gap, the achievement gap, for a kid who's on that lower path, it usually never closes, right? They stay on that same trajectory for their whole educational career. And so by the time they're graduating as a 12th grader, they might be at a 6th grade education. And so SOI is what bridges that gap for kids, because we don't want that path to stay the same. We want to be able to shoot them up. And that's what I've seen SOI have the potential to do for so many kids who have been going like this for so long, and then they spend time in the SOI program, and you're identifying what's really holding them back, and then that whole path that they've been on changes. And that's why it is life-changing, because you know where they're going to end up if SOI hadn't come into their life. So I think that's a big thing, is that people are looking for tutoring, but they don't even know that something like SOI is an option for them, you know? And that's why I think so many times we get so many word of mouth referrals, because people don't even know what they're looking for or what they should want to be looking for,
right.
you know? And I didn't. I mean, I wouldn't have known if I was trying to find something for Ryan. And then I think for the most part, like when you're talking about what do we see in kids coming in, so much vision.
Okay.
So like when we do the CR test, vision indicators, so much comes up in IPP. We refer so many kids to the local developmental optometrist in town. A lot of kids actually just need glasses. I mean, not just need them alone, but that's a big thing that sometimes falls under the radar. And just how they track their tracking and vision skills, you know. And I speculate, like, why do we see so much of that? Is it video games or screen time, or, you know, or maybe it's just that this is the only type of program that's going to identify that, you know, in kids, that it's not overly obvious, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And kind of bouncing off this is something that you and I had kind of talked about earlier in the week, but when we did a webinar, a training, when Dr. Meeker shared in regards to the tendency of labeling students and how that tends to happen more often than you or I would prefer, you had some thoughts on that. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, I really loved how Dr. Meeker was talking about, like, why do we want to jump to give that label to a child? And I think that's so true that I see in my center, is so many parents walk in and say, my child's teacher said they are dyslexic, you know? Well, it's not that simple. Or they said, oh, you know, my child's teacher said they may have ADD or ADHD, you know, and a lot of parents come to us because they don't want to medicate their child, because that's where their brain goes. They think, oh, and I think, you know, what Dr. Meeker was saying is, why do we give those labels right off the bat? Like, why do we feel like we need to do that? You know, what SOI gives us the potential to do is to address all the symptoms, right? We can alleviate so many other things. Let's try, you know, to do work on their weaker skills. And when we boost those up, are you still going to see the thing that you saw that made you think that they were dyslexic? And if we address all those vision indicators that come up on their test, and we work on their sensory integration and their tracking skills in IPP, are you going to see those same things that were driving you to label your child? And I don't think that in most cases, our parents who come in and who are worried about those things, I would say within a month or two, those concerns have gone away, because they're not even seeing the same behaviors. We start to see a confidence in children that they were lacking before. Sometimes just being insecure about learning can look like a learning disability, right? You know?
Yeah.
And it's not to say that those things don't exist, but why don't we do every single thing we can to alleviate all those other symptoms that we're seeing before we jump to that? Because for some kids, having a label ends up being a crutch, or ends up being something that makes them feel like they're less than.
Right.
You know, and I just recently have had a few parents who have really said, well, could it be this? Could it be this? And I'm like, well, I see this, and this. When we go through and we work on all these things, if that one piece, or, you know, is still present, then for sure pursue, you know, a dyslexia diagnosis. But I would say, like, 9 times out of 10, that's not going to happen once we work on all the other things that we're seeing. And I think it's just a lot of parents don't know, and when you don't know, you're not sure and you're looking for answers. And so I think sometimes people feel like labels are an answer.
Yeah.
But for a lot of kids, they end up being a really negative, self-image or something that they put upon themselves. So I just really felt like when Dr. Meeker said that, I felt like it aligned really well with how I felt about things. And so it was just another reminder of how well SOI's philosophy aligns with my own, and how we're giving kids a chance to not have to live with any sort of, feelings like that, of feelings of being less than. We're giving them that opportunity to not ever have to feel that way.
Yeah.
Feel good about themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you talk about giving kids that opportunity to feel good about themselves, to become a better learner, can you describe to me, in simple terms, how the SOI process works at your learning center? So a parent comes in, they're concerned about their child, and then you as a learning center offer both our SOI program, which is the cognitive side of things, and you offer IPP, which is the sensory integration and vision side of things. Can you kind of walk me through that process? If somebody's watching this video and they're going, hey, this kind of sounds like my child, or I'm interested in that, like what can they expect from SOI?
Yeah, definitely. So, obviously we get that first phone call or web submission and we contact the parent. The first thing is to learn about the child. What are you seeing in your child? What concerns do you have? Because there's so many pieces to SOI and it can address so many issues for children that it's so good to know what they're experiencing.
Yep.
And to be able to kind of explain that to parents. So I think that's like the first big piece. And, and just explaining like how the assessment works, what kind of answers it's going to get for you. When a child takes the SOI assessment, I have so many parents who tell me, I'm concerned that my child has attention deficit disorder. And I tell them, we're going to give them the CR test and it could take up to 4 hours. One of the first things that strikes me about parents who come in who are concerned about this for a child is that that child will sit down and they'll take this test for 4 hours with maybe a 5-minute break here and there. They're not out of their seat. They're not distracted. They're not avoiding. They're not talking about anything else. They just sit down and take the test. Now, for a child who has attention deficit disorder, that would be pretty tricky. So it's always nice to say right off the bat, hey, they sat down, they took this test. What they're capable of probably already exceeds what you feel is there. And then from there, it's just explaining all those pieces of the assessment, what they mean, how it relates to learning. I think sometimes the SOI assessment report can seem confusing until, you use some of the tools that SOI has provided, like the client report form, and say, okay, this is how this subsection relates to the learning. This is how it's going to impact your child in the classroom. And most of the times, you're not telling a parent anything they didn't already think or suspect.
Right.
But it's in paper now.
Yeah.
It's in writing. They can go to their child's teacher and say, look, this is why, their memory, their visual memory is really low, or their auditory memory is really low. And so when you start to be able to provide those answers for people, right, that's a big piece of it. And it's just spending that time to go over the test. I feel like I spend so much time with parents when we do that. I'm sure a lot of the times they're like, oh my gosh, like I've been here for an hour. And I'm like, but for me, it's so exciting, right? It's like giving them a roadmap to everything that they've been concerned about for a child. And I think my favorite thing to tell people about SOI is that, great, now we've identified all these things. And then SOI tells us, here's what we're going to do about all of those. Here's how we're going to address every single piece. So many times parents are told, what their child is struggling with, but they're not provided with any answers or support, or what are we going to do now?
Right.
And so I think that's the beauty of SOI, is that every single piece has been thought through. It's not just an assessment. It's not just a curriculum. It's all the pieces combined, you know, and so we're not just addressing, you know, their academic skills. We're looking at their social emotional, you know, when we look at IPP. And so getting parents to understand how that all works together is really important.
Yeah.
And just walking them around the center and using the tools that you guys have provided us, like especially with IPP, with the how, what, why chart, right?
Yeah.
That explains what each exercise is going to help their child with, you know? And so that's the process. And then usually parents say to me, okay, well, when can my child start? Like in a few weeks? Is it going to be like, I'm like, nope, you can start tomorrow. Like we can be ready to go if we need to.
Yeah.
And, you know, even when we work with people remotely, they're like, okay, well, like, then what's going to happen now? And I'm like, you know, Lauren's going to get you your workbook sent out like tomorrow or the next day. And it's going to be to you in 3 or 4 days and you can start. And I think that's amazing too, because there's no hold up when it comes to helping these kids. And I always tell parents, like, let's go. Like, if you're ready, now's the time. For children who are struggling academically, there is absolutely no time to waste.
Right.
You know, and so we just have to go for it.
So since you have all of these parents who are excited to get started right away, I'm sure that you probably have a few success stories from your learning center. Is there anyone in particular that you might like to share with us to kind of wrap this up on a high note, or something in general that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, you know, so many success stories now, being in business, working with all these different kids. You know, I think the biggest success is when we have a child who's been coming into our center for 2 years and they're not there because they need to be anymore, but because their parents are so happy with everything that SOI has done for them that they're willing to keep coming, you know. I've had parents who've said, do you need a business partner? Because I'm so inspired or passionate about what SOI has done for my child that if you need money, I'll give it to you. You know, I think that's a success in itself.
Yeah.
But I mean, the true success has come from the fact that I would say 90% of the kids we see, parents report right away an increase in confidence. School anxiety, going to school is alleviated. They're happy to be at school again. They're engaged in the classroom. You know, we have so many parents come in who say, you know, since starting SOI, their child's teacher is now asking them, what are you doing? Like, what's changed? Like, are you in some new program? Are you seeing a tutor? Like, they'll come in, and even if their child's teacher didn't even know what they were doing, they come in saying they've noticed something that's changed in their child's demeanor. And obviously we want every child to reach their academic goals, but that self-confidence increase and that feeling of being successful and feeling worthy is something that kids who have struggled for a long time lack. They don't feel good about themselves, and it's what makes them feel like they want to give up, or, you know, maybe that's what stops them from going to college, or maybe it even prevents them from graduating high school. So for me, that change in kids is the biggest success story that we could ever have, because no matter what, you know, not every child has to be a straight A student.
Right.
But if they don't love learning and they're not happy at school, then they're going to struggle through, you know, 5, 6, 7, 12, 13 years, right? So that's the success that I get from all of my kids, that I can say as a whole, SOI has changed for all of those children, you know. And obviously there's the smaller ones, like, you know, my own sons getting the tennis champ award,
that's not a small one.
Being
that's a
able
big one.
to,
It's a big one.
Just like you hear kids who come in and say, I got an A on my test, or my teacher picked me to do this thing where I normally would have never got picked before. For me, like, all those little stories, are so amazing. When they come in, they want to show you their report card, and I've had kids tell me I've never had an A before.
Oh, bless their little hearts.
This is my first time getting an A. Right?
Yeah.
So for them, that's like something that, will change their life. So
absolutely.
It speaks to the biggest successes.
It does. Well, thank you. That's all I have today. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to sit down with me and to talk. I, for one, am so happy that you are offering these services to where you are, and I'm sure you have numerous more parents and students who are also happy that you're doing the same thing. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you guys for providing such an awesome product, service, and always supporting us and, making sure all our questions are answered 100% of the time. I couldn't be more grateful for that, honestly, truly. That's what makes it possible,
Absolutely. Well, we'll all keep working together and helping these kids and adults, whoever needs it, and we'll get her done.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, I will touch back in with you later. Thank you, Jessica.
All right. You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.